Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Board of Supervisors regular meeting for Monday, May 2nd. If everyone would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moment of silence. Thank you.
Madam Chair, under the adoption of the agenda,
Yes, sir.
just a housekeeping matter for me. Under, I think it's, which item is it? Sorry, I was just there a minute ago. The building committee, that would be item, oh, well, I still can't staple together there.
It's G1, yes, sir.
G1, if we could add a motion to convene the building committee, and then we'd have to adjourn it after the business is conducted, but I think that would be...
I presume that was inherent with the body. I don't know that you need a separate agenda item, and I did note that for the evening broadband authority, but I don't think I noted it in that narrative for that meeting.
I just think that we should do that, so at that point I would make a motion to convene the building committee.
Okay. We have one change to the agenda. Any other?
So what is the specific change?
Just a motion to convene the building committee.
Okay.
We're all here, all five of us. Then it would require a motion at the end of that. I'm sorry, it would be a motion to adjourn the meeting required after that, after the business is conducted. So a motion added to convene the building committee, and then we would have an adjournment of that.
Okay, so it's some...
But that's not a motion of the Board of Supervisors.
No.
Right. So that's why I didn't put it on the Board of Supervisors agenda.
So I'll just recognize you. You're the chair of the building committee.
Yes.
I'll just recognize you and let you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
but so there's no adjustment to the agenda?
No, I just said it was a housekeeping matter. We will have to
Okay,
do that
all
at
right.
that point.
Madam Chair, I'll put forward a motion that we adopt the agenda as presented, posted to board docs.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we're at presentations. We have Dr. Grimsley, the Superintendent School Report.
Good afternoon. It's good to be here in person today. I haven't seen you guys in a while. Whew, it's busy time of year for your public schools. Including this weekend, we just completed a wonderful prom at Bowling Green and had a wonderful after prom event, and then yesterday the senior banquet, all in the same weekend because of course we didn't know what was going to happen with COVID and if we had to share the tent for the event outside. So that's why. So I have a lot of tired chaperones today. We have also begun our end-of-year assessments and SOLs. We're excited for our students to show what they know. They have worked extremely hard this year, and I'm sure their assessments will reflect this hard work. This is also the time of year when we celebrate successes. Included in this report is also a calendar of all the end-of-year events, in case you are interested in attending any of them, including some the spring sports senior night, softball and baseball are actually happening this Thursday. We have a scholarship ceremony at RCHS on May 12th at 1:30. The spring band concert is on the 12th at 6 p.m. Baccalaureate Sunday, May 22nd, and I believe that's at 5. And graduation on May 27th at 7. So please let us know if you plan to attend graduation, and we'll be sure you'll have a seat. And we are so excited to celebrate these events as normal as possible without COVID restrictions. So long as our case rates and community transmission remains at current or lower levels, we look to be in the clear. We have begun planning for our summer school program as well as summer enrichment programs. This year, summer school and summer enrichment will run both in June and July, with academic support focused programming in June, followed by hands-on learning, enrichment, and creativity focus in July. We also have a partnership with RAPC to offer select high school students who applied and were accepted to our new Pathways Academy, a 6-week summer program providing in-depth career exploration activities for students to participate in job shadowing, advisement from successful business professionals, financial skills workshops, and field trips. Thanks to grants received for this program, all 20 juniors or seniors who are accepted into the program also receive a $1,000 stipend, $100 to invest as part of an exercise, and $100 to purchase clothing for a professional interview. We look forward to a successful launch of this new program as part of our commitment to graduating life-ready students. To that end, the new draft comprehensive plan is out for review. We will have a public hearing at the next school board meeting on May 10th to receive feedback about our draft plan, Road to Remarkable. We welcome any comments from the public that will help strengthen our plan and move us closer to achieving our goals in the next 5 years. As always, we thank you so much for your continued support and advocacy for your local public school. We thank you in advance for your consideration of the school board proposed budget as well. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions for me?
I'm glad you ended with the budget. So with the additional state dollars that are flowing into your budget this year, I've had a number of constituents express concern that might have the effect of raising the baseline for future budget requests from a local perspective, and I wonder if you could speak to that. I did raise this question with Mr. Curry, and he addressed it in part, but now's the opportunity to ask you.
Absolutely. No, thank you for the question. It is an important one, especially since we don't yet have a state budget approved. So the big question in those budget lines with the increase in state funding and federal funding coming to us is in the infrastructure and modernization line.
Okay.
So what we did was, in anticipation, if the $1 million budget line comes through, which Rappahannock County Schools would receive that $1 million, we condensed our 5-year capital improvement plan into 2 years. So in the chance that it goes to the regular infrastructure, $200,000, we would then just stretch out our capital improvement plan, reduce the expenditure lines, and there would be no impact to county dollars. So that's how we deal with that. If that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you for that. And then I hate to beat a dead horse on an old issue, but the Schoolhouse Road traffic issue continues to haunt certain of my constituents, and they had been silent for some time. So I inferred that the problem had resolved itself. So Ms. Johnson and Mr. Tepper were fantastic in meeting with me, and we watched the traffic flow. But I'm wondering if you, and I hate to throw this out publicly, but I wonder if we could revisit what could be done. I realize the school year is winding down, but they did have one solution that perhaps could be implemented pretty quickly and then would hopefully make a difference in the fall when school's back in session. That's to add a traffic loop behind the elementary school to take more cars off of Schoolhouse Road, but it seems like it's an acute problem that has not improved.
Well, and I know they did add that loop, and it's been painted, and so I think it's just some more backup that parents are getting there earlier.
Okay, so
they did. So,
wow.
And I think the only other solution would be to tell parents you just can't come, and then we'd need some. That might be a different issue that we might have to.
I didn't realize the additional loop had been put in place, so I'll go out there and observe, and then we'll try to think of a plan.
Happy to help, definitely, if we can
you.
make it run a little bit more smoothly.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Was that, if I could comment on that, that was a plan of former boards of supervisors to use the property that we had purchased to make a connector road, if you will, behind the schools, and to come out on Rock Mills Road. And that was nearly derailed completely by that bike trail fiasco. I mean, we have an old road bed back there behind the high school that connects up to Rock Mills Road. We nearly lost all of that. So that's a possibility of something the board can do in the future, but only if we retain the property.
Right, and this is on Schoolhouse Road in front of the elementary school.
And that doesn't go to Schoolhouse Road, but it does go behind the high school.
I got you.
there might be something that we can do to get from
Okay.
Schoolhouse Road back over to Rock Mills.
I see.
But if you get rid of the one part, you can't use the second part very well.
Good. Thanks for that background.
The only thing I have is I love the schedule. I would like to have it monthly when you're, starting out, because I forget that you've got wonderful events going, and I'm sorry I've missed them so if we can do that on a regular basis, that would be fabulous. And then in the past, we've done graduation cards to students in our districts. I'm just wondering if the board would like to continue that, and
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll get you your list, definitely, in each district. I know that goes a long way, and that, I know the seniors and their families would love to hear from you, absolutely.
hard to believe it's just around the corner.
Yes.
Anything else for Dr. Grimsley? All right, thank you very much.
Appreciate it, thank you.
At this time, we go into public comment. Anyone wishing to speak, please raise your hand, be recognized, and when you come up, give us your name and the district you're in. And the name is for everybody listening in Zoom world and at the tape later, not just for us. So,
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Donna McCon. I'm in the Jackson District, and I'm here about the fireworks ordinance draft proposal. I did read over it, and I don't know if this is couth or not, but just to make sure you got everything from my neighbor, Karen Hunt, since she couldn't be here, she sent you guys something. In reading over it, a couple things that I was concerned about. The section F on the advance notice, because it only pertains to adjacent property owners, I would like to see it again, possibly put in the paper at, of course, the permittee's expense. Because I realize that's something that the county shouldn't pay for. But being, maybe within a mile or two of where that last incident occurred, very loud where I was, and of course I wouldn't know it because, again, right now it's only going to be for the adjacent property owners. So I'm not adjacent, but yet as loud as it was, I might as well have been. The other section is section J. While I know Gary Curry has a lot on his plate, I would like to see something where at least he would have to authorize the permits. I realize he doesn't need to do all the legwork, but his final say-so in any permits, his signature would be a big help. So at least it gets, if he has somebody that's helping him, you're going to get two people looking at it and not overseeing anything. A couple things that weren't mentioned in the permit, and one thing obviously I am very big on is safety of animals. Not only do we have a lot of horses in our county, it is agricultural, obviously. I run a dog boarding kennel, and dogs get very scared of this too. I mean, thankfully, I was able to get some breaks in that day to get the dogs out that wouldn't have freaked out and tried to get off the property. It is fenced in, but still, you just never know what the dogs are going to do in a case like this where they are that loud that it sounds like bombs. Again, going back to like 4th of July, everybody knows that there's going to be fireworks on 4th of July. We all prepare for it. But something like this that's just out of the blue, we had no preparation for. Even New Year's Eve at midnight. Of course, I'm not going to have out my customers' dogs at midnight. I'm very particular about the times, as Ron probably knows. The last thing that wasn't mentioned in the permit was a peace officer on site, again, for safety reasons. Either somebody connected with the sheriff's department, or I know we don't have a real, fire marshal, but someone that would have the capability of knowing what would be safe during these presentations. And again, I would address that would be paid for by the permittee, not the county. So those are my thoughts, and I would ask you maybe to table this till next month, just to have more time for you guys as the supervisors to look over it. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, Doug Elkins from the Piedmont District. I'm aware that there are two roads, well, there are more, but there are two roads adjacent to the road that I live on. They're just under consideration for paving. I do believe that's Swindler Holler and Piney Ridge. And the reason I'm saying that is I live on Hall School Road, which is not even a half a mile shoot that dead ends at the park. I've been on that road for 14 years now. Not once has DOT been there and did any road maintenance. Just recently, a couple months ago, they did spread a small amount of gravel in places that didn't need it. Now, if I know it's gonna be considered, and hopefully the consideration will be approved to actually pave those roads, but in the meantime, I would ask you, my supervisor, and the Board of Supervisors to ask Department of Transportation, especially Rappahannock DOT, to at least resurface with gravel and fix Hall School Road. Because when it rains, you almost have to have a four-wheel drive to get out of there because the water ponds up deeply and it's nothing but a mud pit. And it is a state-maintained road, which hasn't had any maintenance done on it. So there's a neglect there. So I want the board to let DOT know that that neglect needs to be drowned out and that they need to come and fix Hall School Road if they're going to do the maintenance on the other two. There's no sense in having that whole horseshoe paved and then Hall School Road remains a goat trail. It's unacceptable for me, and I've been back here 14 years and nothing's been done. So today I'm asking you to maybe put a little bird in DOT to fix, or it doesn't have to be paved with the others, but at least fix the surface structure of Hall School Road. That's all I ask. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
We get Sheila? You. Yep.
I told Kira I was going to have fun today. Sheila Gressinger, Hampton District. We hear a lot of negative stuff, so I figured I wanted to come with something that's really positive. I went to the dump on Friday. It's the first time I've been in quite a while, and I was just amazed. It looks absolutely wonderful. I'm so pleased with all the work that everybody did. I want to commend our county administrator, Gary Curry, for gathering the people around that he needed, listening to people, whatever contacts he had. I know it took a long time, but it just is a huge difference, and it's wonderful. And then I went to the Share Shack, and I took a picture. You can't really see it, but if you've been there, you know that here it is. It's been reopened, and this was something that was under conversation after COVID, like, oh, how are we going to get this done? And then a group of volunteers stepped up and I believe worked with Mr. Carey and Willie to get the thing straightened out and everything. And they've come together. They come every Tuesday to get everything squared away and everything. So I think it's a wonderful example of how we can come together in a positive way and a can-do spirit that we have. So I just want to say thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Yes, sir.
Page Glenn, Jackson District, and I'd like to talk about the fireworks regulation. First of all, thank you for getting on the situation, particularly the issue that happened on Battle Mountain Road, which is totally unacceptable. And I'd like to know, I am in favor of people having fireworks on their property for whatever event, as long as it's relatively safe. I don't even care if it's Pennsylvania level or South Carolina level fireworks, but I realize that you can't go back beyond state requirements. Maybe I missed it in the regulation, but there needs to be a time limit on it. This Saturday, I was awoken at 2 o'clock with fireworks by my neighbor. Thank God the parents responded within a few minutes, all right? It was a graduation, whatever, cookout party. But there needs to be a time limit on it, all right? I had no problem with him sitting around the campfire hearing, because I could hear everything, even though it was a quarter of a mile away. But anyway, the fireworks at 2 o'clock definitely woke me up. But please put a time limit on, 10 o'clock or something like that. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's John Kaiser, and I live in is it the Piedmont District?
It still is. It still is.
You know it? Oh, good. I gather this evening is the time when many of the citizenry of the county will listen in or contribute to the ongoing discussion about this contract from whatever they're called. Is that correct?
You're talking about the broadband?
Yes.
Yes, correct.
That's on the agenda for tonight. And is this like the final shot, or is there a possibility for continued analysis and discussion?
We'll see how it goes.
I do recall the article in the Rappahannock News the week before last, in which, am I going to be arrested? What did I say?
Go ahead, Mr. Kaiser.
Yes, I lost my train of thought now. It's all your fault. Yes, I recall there was a paragraph, or actually it was just a sentence in the previous Rappahannock News in which Gary had apparently told the person who wrote that he had some concerns about the agreement. And so I'm curious to know if he still has those concerns and what they are. And rather than get into it here about, unless they've disappeared overnight, it might be worth hearing what your concerns were, and maybe you could say it today and tonight as well as now if you feel like it. So I think that there's I do not know Mr. What's his name? Danny, what's his name?
Oh, Mr. Carr from All Points Broadband?
No, the inhabitant of Amosville who has a lot of opinions about this project.
This guy.
Oh, Mr. Glennie.
This guy.
I'm sorry.
Oh, good. So he's somebody who I would like to hear, if not here, and I think preferably this evening. I hope he will be given time, maybe more time than usual, to articulate his concerns in front of a larger audience, and maybe even allow him a little extra slack to make whatever points he thinks are important or have been overlooked or misrepresented and all of that stuff. So this is a big plan and a big decision. Even to me, I'm hardly an analyst of large projects' viability, but something as big as and important to this, I think common sense says you want to do it right. And if he can be convinced, or other people with his level of knowledge, and that's the key, is the level of knowledge that can be applied to analyzing all the stuff that's going on, we need to tap that knowledge. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or black or white, I think there's unfortunately been a certain amount of politics associated with Mr. Glennie, and I think it's outrageous for the county to be influenced by politics and on a subject as important as this. So I just hope that he will have an opportunity to explain his concerns and not be given sort of 60 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Yes, ma'am.
Damaris Miller, Hampton District. I won't be able to be here tonight because I'm going to have out-of-town relatives coming in, so I will speak to the broadband issue. Many of us who have opposed this particular plan have been accused of being opposed to broadband expansion in the county. I'm not. I think there are many ways it can be done. I am very much in favor of expanding it to all the little hollows. I have lots of neighbors. I'm a mile from the main road, and I have lots of neighbors who are more than a mile past me. And I am fortunate. I had Piedmont broadband for which I am eternally grateful. I'm also very pleased with the speed that I get with that. I didn't move to Rappahannock County expecting to get really high-speed internet. If I wanted that, I'd stayed in Fairfax. But I came here more than 20 years ago, and I've been very happy. But given that this county is about to sign this, and I consider it virtually a foregone conclusion, you've been given a gift horse with this extra money, and the state is putting in money, and you see it as a big, wonderful thing to get. Unfortunately, I think when it's all said and done years from now, either it will not all be installed the way you think it will be, or it will be installed and it will not be maintained the way you expect, and we'll still have 20 to 30% of the county that does not have the kind of speeds you've been talking about. There were other ways, and I was a big advocate of these smaller outfits that do have to put in a lot of little poles instead of big giant towers. But the big problem with this APB thing is if I were going to be a vendor and I were going to write a contract that favored me at the expense of those who are signing the contract and paying the bills, that's the contract I would write. It is so full of holes for the county, and it is so full of advantages for the vendor. APB doesn't have to promise to maintain at any particular level. They don't have to promise to, we're not having any kind of enforcement. And all of the things that I have read, and I've read just about everything that's been put out on this, tell me that it's going to be virtually impossible to hold them to what they say they're going to do. Personally, I don't think it'll ever get to my house, even though I technically am one of those who should get it because I am a mile away from the nearest Comcast line. And my neighbors that are 2 miles away from the Comcast line, they're hoping to get it. It ain't gonna happen. I just don't see it. We don't even have overhead power lines. It's all underground. And they aren't planning to do this stuff underground. They're not gonna run 2 miles of underground to my house and to my neighbors' houses. It's just not gonna happen. And there's no way for you guys to enforce it once you sign onto this thing. So do please pay attention to Paige Glennie, who does have the expertise. He keeps warning you about the holes. He knows what he's talking about. He's done this kind of procurement in huge things, much bigger than this, for many years. And when he tells you there are big holes in there, you should have paid attention. I'm sorry you didn't. And I despair that we're going to get this anyway and be stuck with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Capioli, Hampton District. First, the officer that just came up the steps, I want to point out he is a credit to the county. A couple of weeks ago, broke down with a tractor trailer on the side of the road just after I came out of my driveway. Called the sheriff's department. He came out, made sure that we didn't get run over for the 20 minutes we were stuck there on the side of the road. I've unloaded machines in the county. I call the sheriff's department and they come right out to make sure that we stay safe. We've tried to do it on 522 and nobody slows down, just coming out of Flint Hill. That was not what I was here for. But he happened to walk in and he's just a really nice guy. As to the broadband, I hope that you support it. I hope that it goes through this evening. And the last thing, which was the reason that I was here, I understand you're going to have a closed meeting today. And I believe the purpose of it will involve me. I am hoping that we can move on to the next step of what that is instead of dragging it out. Mr. Connick already intends to drag it out. The Board of Supervisors does not need to drag it out. I just want to move on, just like the judge has said. As permitted, as submitted, let's move on to the next thing. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else in the courtroom? Not seeing any hands. For the folks that are joining us by Zoom, if you'd like to speak, I see one hand now. Mr. Price has his hand up. Go ahead, Mr. Price.
All right, good afternoon, to the board here at Rappahannock County and to Mr. Terry. I would like to, my plan was to be there today, but I have a 3 o'clock meeting, so I couldn't make it to come and let you all know this in person. I come to you today to let you know that as of Friday, May 6th, I'm planning on retiring from Rappahannock Electric Cooperative after 42 years of service to
Wow.
Rappahannock Electric Cooperative and its members. And I appreciate all the support that the board has given me over that time. Also, my replacement has not been selected yet, and as soon as that person is selected, I am sure they will pick up where I left off. So again, I do appreciate everything from the board and the administration and of course my members in Rappahannock County. So thank you.
Hey, Oliver, this is Keir Whitson. Thanks a lot for your service and everything you've done for my constituents in the Hampton District. And I wish you well, and I hope you go to a sunny locale for a while and relax. Thanks for everything.
Congratulations and thank you, Oliver.
Mr. Price, Ron Fraser here. I think I'm going to submit a motion that we petition REC to reject your application for I'm serious.
Better hang up now, Oliver.
You think we're kidding? All right, thank you. Anyone else on Zoom that would like to speak during public comment? All right, I am not seeing any Zoom hands raised. I will go ahead and close public comment.
Madam Chair, I'll put forward a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Whitson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I did have a question, and this can be a quick question on the contingency budget line. What's the Bolton GASB preparation?
Sure. That's a bill that we would normally expect to receive next fiscal year. It's actually next fiscal year's budget. But the work got done quicker than anticipated. It's already done. We already have the invoice. So I basically want to pay it this year, and then maybe next year's work we'll keep ahead.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. All right, going into appointments.
Yes, as you've had on your agenda over the last several months, there continues to be a vacancy on the Agricultural and Forestal Districts Advisory Committee. The prerequisite is that the person needs to be a landowner, so if you know a landowner who wants to be involved in a meeting about once a year, please put their attention to this and have them submit an application.
Rappahannock County Recreation Facilities.
Madam Chair, I have good news to report. At the finish line of the fodder stack, I crossed paths with a constituent of mine named Stacy Glemboski, and she has been attending park meetings recently. Maybe Mr. Carney knows Stacy. She is interested in sitting on the Park Authority board. She was traveling out of town shortly after the fodder stack, so has not yet submitted an application. But she's highly qualified, an avid tennis player, very enthusiastic, and has already volunteered a lot of time. So hopefully we'll see that application in the coming weeks, and then we can get her on board at our June meeting.
What did she think about pickleball?
I wouldn't ask a tennis player what they think about pickleball. It's not worth going down that road.
It's never the first question for an RCRFA applicant.
So the policy lists the Rec Authority as one of the bodies for which advertisement in newspaper is somewhat automatic unless it's waived by the board. I plan to do that in the coming month, and then the board can make appointments at your June meeting or July meeting and essentially have no gap in appointment, assuming you have enough interest. I will also be notifying Mr. Yao Ms. Beers and Mr. Whitson, that they can seek reappointment if they so desire.
Let's get Ms. Glombowski appointed quickly.
And just to be clear, this is, as noted, Mr. Whitson's appointed as a citizen as opposed to Mr. Carney, who's the board rep. And that was because we weren't able to find somebody in the previous month. A similar situation with the Planning Commission. Those seats run through the end of June, and there are two that are expiring. That you could appoint on July 2nd, and that's MKSU from Piedmont and Rick Kohler from Jackson. So similarly, the policy would require me to notify them and place notice in the paper, which would happen during May.
I think they should be advertised.
Is that a motion?
It's a standard requirement, so a motion would be needed to change from the policy. So the policy says that I'm supposed to advertise, so.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Make it so. All right, old business, building committee requested direction. Mr. Frazier.
Yes, if I could have all the building committee members here, if I could get a motion to convene the building committee.
So moved.
I have a move, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Were you going to say something, Mr. Curry? Okay. Mr. Frazier?
Well, the building committee, excuse me, the building committee has been working, as you know, on several projects. Number one would be to create a methodology to protect the envelope of several of our historic buildings. And the second is the space study needs that we've been working on, and the possibility of either a new courthouse or what we need to do to this one to bring it up to the requirements of the court in modern day Virginia. So with that, I'd like to allow Mr. Blenny and Mr. Waters to make a presentation that all of the building committee worked on, but I think they predominantly have done the footwork on this.
Okay.
And I know I communicated with Mr. Vaughn earlier today. He was traveling. He was thinking he could get on to Zoom, so we'll see. He might not.
Actually, it incorporates his work as far as the drawings and some of the, he calls it back of the napkin pricing. So any of the prices you hear today are really below probably reality.
They're wrong.
It's one digit and the right number of zeros.
We like to say educated guess.
Guarantee it will be wrong.
Right.
Precision is a different topic.
This is to address, I believe was Mr. Whitson's question about utilizing the existing courthouse for court functions. And so, next slide. This is the previous design we had for a separate courthouse that Randy developed, and we went through a number of options. I think this is the one the committee is closest on, though it's not final, all right? You can see where it is. You can see the road going out to Warren Avenue, and it would have a relatively minor view from Gay Street, all right? And it would meet all the security requirements. If you go to the next slide, there's the detail arrangements inside, at least the first shot at them. If Mr. Vaughn is online, he can answer the detailed questions, or I can try and answer them if you have any, all right? But the security issues are addressed. A couple of things to be aware of is you see on the right side, upper level, there's the bottom, let me go over here. This is a big requirement. This is a sally port. This is where they can bring the people in from the jail, close the door, and get them into the holding cell. So you don't have the perk walk that the press can take pictures of, for example. The other one is, this is the judge's chamber. That was over here. Has a separate protected parking space over here. He comes up these stairs and gets there. So he's not coming in the same public access as there. This is basically the Commonwealth Attorney, court records, and then other benefits. So this is the main, right here. This is the main entrance. You come in, go up, and go through security to get to the secure area, right? The clerk, if you're coming just to the clerk's office, you come up the stairs or the elevator. You get to the clerk's office and they don't have to go. But if you're just going in for normal clerk functions. Those are some of the, that's not final, that's not the final design, but those are some of the basic ideas that drive the design, all right? Next slide, option B. This is what we came up with for the, keeping the, just the existing functions that are in this building, all right? And having to do it. Basically, it drives the size to be double. And again, we added it all on the back so that the impact on the view from Gay Street is minimal. But you see how far back that addition goes? That big green box on the right that I'll talk about more is what you have to build for admin if you still want the campus complex, because you've not freed up a whole bunch of other space. All right. Go to the next slide. This is the arrangement. I'm going to come over here again. Some of the big features are you come in the same sort of doors here. You go through security and then you go either up the stairs or up the elevator. You come in ADA this way through security and then go up the elevator. All right. The courthouse over on this side, Gary, think of it as flipped around, okay? So the judge's jury room, the judge's chambers are back here. So this is over there. And
So
that's over here.
the black box or bluish black box you see, that's existing.
Right. Yeah, the black line, this is the existing courthouse.
And behind where you're sitting right now, board members, behind that wall would be where the stairwell and elevators are, which are immediately above the downstairs entrance. And then the bench would be back against the back wall back there. And then beyond that wall would be everything you have to add on 3 floors in the middle and then 2 floors in the back.
It's an addition, the addition is twice the size of this current building.
Because the functions in here with the security require twice as much space. All right. Next slide. Going through the various impacts, probably the biggest one is that court would have to be held somewhere else for at least 1 to 2 years. We did not have time to ask Fauquier County whether or not they're going to accept that or how much money they want to do that, all right? It's believed that they're going to say no, but and I don't know if you're going to go any place other than Fauquier. The cost estimate to do this, which is, you'll see it on a later slide, the cost estimates we're doing now, new construction is $400 a square foot, remodeling, like taking the inside of this, is $200 a square foot. We're just applied that to everything just so that it is a comparison. It's not a number that you can take to the bank, all right? Because inflation is going up. By the time we actually do this, it could be higher, all right? And the remodeling is going to vary a lot. This remodeling is high because of elevators and things like that. But the point is, replacing the functions in this building with the addition is $6.8 million by that estimate methodology. And that does not include all the underground services behind this building. And what we didn't look into what that cost would be. And of course then, as we've said before, you tear into an old building like this, you're going to have wonderful cost and schedule disruptions, all right? Which, as you will get dominoes. And when you get one domino, then you lose that subcontractor, then that gets worse and worse and worse, all right? We haven't thought through how we would reschedule the exterior preservation to do with this, but it probably would be delayed. You lose the shared security on the clerk and the Commonwealth Attorney. And then I go through, I thought you all had agreed on the campus requirement for the county functions. But by not freeing up those 2 buildings, it makes, and this building, for the Board of Supervisors conference room, it creates a big space hole, all right?
Freeing up, which other two buildings?
The clerk's office, Commonwealth Attorney's office, and then this building, all right? And if you remember I think it's on the next slide, the space requirements before, those add enough space where we could theoretically even take out this second floor and still have enough space. So we could take this back to the original configuration, for example, and still have enough space by our current requirements, right? And it creates the problem with swing space. When we have to refurbish both the treasurer's and the commissioner of revenue office, they're gonna have to move out of those spaces for a period of time. So there's this whole domino of swing space. And to be perfectly honest, the best place right now is that clerk's office, all right? So as soon as that courthouse is gone, that space becomes, then we move them in there for a period of time while we do that building, that's, and then back. And so, for example, in that domino, Gary would be the last one to be back on the campus. All right. But all that has to be worked out yet, all right? I mentioned that new structure is about 12,000 square feet, all right? Again, that is one or two digits in the right number of zeros. It's still has to be worked out. And again, that building would have to be built first, because I don't know if another county is gonna allow you to have Board of Supervisors, BZA, and Planning Commission meetings. And then you would have to improve the security in the clerk's office and Commonwealth.
We would have to partner with the schools or something for those meetings.
Right, yeah, something. The next slide is the comparative cost slide. You got them over here on point. This is the new courthouse option. This is the same square foot times that 400. This is moving all the admin into these spaces at the $200 a square foot. So then on option B, this is the new addition to the courthouse. This is the new admin building, and this is refurbishing those. So you can see what the bottom line difference is. It's in one digit, the right number of zeros, it's a 40% increase in cost. And we still have unknowns in the cost estimate. And they're all going against keeping it here. So in summary, the last slide, it's at least a 40% cost increase to go with trying to keep court function in this building. We lose the court functions for 1 to 2 years. And it's going to be a bigger impact on the look and feel from Gay Street. Any questions?
So I'm just trying to catch up on the per square foot numbers. So $400 per square foot for new construction, $200 for renovation. And we get you're saying we're getting a much larger number if we worked with this building, correct?
Yes. It's 12.5 million versus 9 million.
And that's because of the tremendous amount of additional square footage that would be required, that would basically.
New construction.
Yeah.
But I think, obviously, at the end of the day, you end up serving all of the uses in both categories, but the efficiency of how they're put together is hampered when you're trying to build into the envelope of a historic building and from the front, just go straight back so you don't see this big thing on the back. Those constraints, I think, cause it to be a little less efficient, and then you purposely designing the new building to fit the adjacencies and everything.
Don't know if it's directly applicable, but Madison County took that approach. Now, I don't know if that's what happened in their cost estimate between what their architect said and what the contractor said.
They worked with what they had.
They added to their back end. Ron, you have the numbers on there? It was initially estimated at 6, the lowest bid on the contractors came in at 8.
No, it was 8.9, it was roughly 9 million.
9 million.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, and that was 15 years ago.
So, yeah, and, depending on what type of contract you do, if you're gonna put all the risk on the contractor, if he comes in an old building, he's gonna jack up that price to cover his risk.
Yeah, I worked for the architect of the Capitol for almost 5 years in Washington DC, and if we hit asbestos, which isn't in any of these buildings, we didn't have any downtime. We hit it at, let's say Monday, Monday night, they were in there, maybe Tuesday, we were back on the job. Same thing with lead-based paint, which we don't have in this building at all. Same thing, the crew came in and knocked it out, and I've been on commercial jobs that shut those jobs down for a month or two at a time for each one of those, because lead-based paint is not gonna be eradicated while they're in there taking care of the asbestos issue. So if you hit both of those things as soon as the doors are opened, then you're looking at 2 to 3 months, and we don't have anybody under contract to take care of that. I don't know if any GC would. We didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, we would have to do testing before the contract, identify,
Yeah.
areas, disclose, and then have that included in the contract, and the contractor would have to have their subs lined up, and
It's a lot that we don't know going into something like that. And of course, we're gonna hit those same issues regardless of how we go about it. But if you're talking about shutting this building down while you're doing an addition and remodel, then that just adds time to it, even if we're partly prepared for it.
And what I think I heard you say that if there's one element of urgency built into your presentation, if I understood it correctly, is if we went the route of, call it option B, which is working with this building, then that would directly affect our separate plan for working on the outside of this building. Did I hear you correctly?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a possibility.
but we certainly wouldn't want to be doing a lot of work on the envelope of this building while this building is being
Right.
part of a bigger thing.
A piecemeal approach, like, yeah, we probably want to address that chimney, but not much more than that. We would address immediate issues until we did the renovation.
I see.
But the new building, as I said, has to be built first. So in an option A, the courthouse, the new courthouse building has got to be built first to free up the swing space and other places.
But if we went that route, then we could simultaneously work on the outside of this building to protect it in a robust way. That was kind of my question.
Just giving you full knowledge of the issues of working on the outside of these buildings, we're going to have to put some schedule constraints on it for busy times of commissioner revenue at
Election time.
treasurer, and the courtroom is the courthouse itself.
Right.
And then I think we don't even allow grass cutting while court's in session, so, chipping off concrete is not going to be going very well for the judge.
Right.
So those efforts get a cost increase to deal with sound.
I get it. Yeah.
Impacts.
If I can, at this point, I think I would be negligent if I didn't add that I believe it is the understanding of the judges that we are building a new courthouse facility to be used only for court. And if we're going to go with this Plan B, we need to perhaps loop the judges back into it.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think it's definitely their understanding that we're not going to use the courtroom for things like what's happening today. And so if you were to renovate this and build to the rear or whatever, I think their expectation is that you're building somewhere else for community meetings.
Oh, but I think they were okay with the idea of holding court here till we had a new facility. If we're talking about shutting this facility down.
But they didn't say anything other, so, yeah.
So, but I mean.
We took it as we could.
Yeah.
Mr. Frazier and board, Ms. Ralph would like to speak if everyone is,
Put the mic down, Paige. Put the mic down, Paige.
so we can hear her.
Yeah, you got it.
You gotta.
You got it.
It is my understanding, and Mr. Curry was there when we met with Judge Fleming, a meeting that was asked for by the Board of Supervisors. It is my understanding that the judge stamped a new building. And I would suggest also that if you go on with something changed, you go without handing him some information about it, we can be in a lot of trouble. Putting another court, an addition in the back is not what he signed up for, in my opinion. And I think you would agree. He did say, the building that we are building, I want you to be very clear about this, is to be a courthouse only. you might want to check before you make any plans.
Yes,
Because
we did have a lot of in-depth conversation about some other localities where there were attached government services type uses, and there were concerns about the security of those type of staff being able to wander in and out of the secure area, and that secure perimeter was very important to him. His concerns were security, security, security. And then, gee, Rappahannock's a beautiful place, and we love that you do things a little bit different out here. But it was security, security, security. And definitely we didn't want anything where we had the opportunity for non-court personnel to have key access, like fob access, in and out of the court secure area.
And having court, from experience here in this room, when construction is going on, would be practically impossible. It would have to stop. So you're not gaining anything by saying the court can meet. Yes, we can be here, but we can't hear a thing.
Right.
The second thing I have to ask is Fauquier County. This amazes me to think that you would move the court system, our court system, to Fauquier County for 1 to 2 years, maybe 3 years, without even questioning the people who are going to be involved in this, i.e., the current clerk's office. That's kind of putting the cart before the horse. When I say the clerk's office, I mean the court. I mean the judges of the circuit court. Just food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peggy?
Peggy, I had a note here, make sure to talk to Peggy about what she thinks. I'm glad you stood up and I'm glad you were here.
I do have a question. The new building that you have envisioned, the clerk's office is, the circuit court clerk's office is on the first floor, correct?
It's all supposed to be in there. I'll have to double check. Here, look.
Yep.
I wasn't sure from a small copy there.
It's 3 courts that would be affected, so we
I would
have
just say,
3
these are extremely preliminary.
Or like, yeah.
They're concept level, and any sort of design will go through a process that will be vetted through the clerks and the court and the board and everybody, so.
The only reason I ask that is that you realize that the circuit court clerk's office is also the county court, the county clerk's office.
Yeah.
So citizens have to be able to get in there. It should be on the first floor, whatever you do.
Access is critical, and of course,
Access is absolutely critical.
the highest foot traffic area will tend to be designed to be on that main floor to the greatest extent possible.
And did I understand you, Mr. Gunny, when you said that if they were to close the treasurer's office and the commissioner of revenue's office, they would wind up here in the clerk's office?
Temporarily, possibly.
Once
you move.
They go there, right? To answer your question is, you're on the upper,
If we could get more than this, that we could say that they would move in while she's there.
your office is over here.
But again,
It has
Preliminary.
preliminary, yes.
this is a proof of concept to get a proper approximate square footage and structured in a way that has proper adjacencies.
So,
That's
yes,
it.
citizen, you're on the second floor, yes, citizens wouldn't, that's the second floor.
Got it.
So yes, citizens will have to come up either stairs or an
Well,
elevator.
so the
They
second.
do not have to go through security to get to your office.
The way this was conceived is that the second floor is walk out to Gay Street, and the first floor is walk out to the rear. So they're both at grade, and people might approach the building and park in different areas depending on who they wanted to enter on the floor they wanted for this very conceptual building.
Very.
Right, but I think Ms. Ralph brings up a very, very serious issue as, dates that we could work on, whether it's this building or additions or whatever. But the problem is, there are 3 courts that you have to look at the schedule. You've got juvenile domestic, you've got combined general district, and then you've got the circuit court. So you have to try and work around 3 different court schedules on the days that you tell the contractors that they can work, and that will balloon the cost up tremendously if they're only working 2 days this week, 3 days next week, an entire week out.
And that would only be for the envelope. I don't think it's feasible to repurpose.
No, once you get the building shell up, you can start working at night, so the contractor would probably do that to make, headway. But you can't do that when you're trying to come up out of the ground.
Interior preservation is going to have a higher cost due to schedule impacts.
Well, and
Schedule limitations.
it also impacts two things that we didn't discuss yet, which we did discuss in the building committee meeting, which is the parking in the back of the courthouse. A lot of folks park to the rear of the courthouse, and it would definitely impact the availability of parking to those areas under construction and certainly permanently also. And then the utilities that run through the back of the complex
We have no
would all
cost on
need to
that.
be relocated, which would be, a major undertaking for construction, but also for the folks in the offices trying to carry on business on a daily basis. That would be a huge nuisance. Nuisance is probably too kind a word.
Yeah, and really, board members, our committee really can't go much further on this, and therefore the board can't go much further on this until the majority of this board gives us a direction.
Mr. Vaughn has joined us, looks like, at least a 434 number has, so I think that's it. If you have any questions for him.
Thank you again for the presentation. I think last time I iterated that I think one of the biggest assets that the county has are these buildings. And I would, for one, personally, and I know that a lot of the folks that I've talked to would like to see them preserved and preserved in the right way so that they do last. And it seems to me that the most efficient, most economic, and the best option is to go ahead and build a new courthouse. It seems to me what you guys have pulled together for us like the right way forward. And that if we start to try and kind of add on to this building, we could open a whole can of worms.
Yeah.
Not to mention a can of worms with scheduling, and
Right.
as Peggy mentioned, I mean, it just seems like a lot to try and do for very little gain.
You can move the addition around the back in different ways, different degrees, but you're still talking about a large addition around the back, and it's gonna create the same problems. The utilities are underneath the parking area that's there now, and all of that would have to be moved so that it could be serviced later at some point.
The cost estimate on the new building, if we do the new building, is that to mirror the look of these buildings, or is it a different, what's the materials and?
It's very
Yeah,
preliminary.
the idea is that, yes, it would look the same. How far we go with that, with, for example, pointing the brick, that's still a decision you get to make.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Well, it would be a different type of construction. With this type of construction, you have, the brick is several brick thick.
Yeah.
Because it all ties together with that Flemish bond. We can recreate a Flemish bond
Look.
veneer look on a new building.
Yeah,
And
it
the
would be
brick-
a cavity wall construction.
Bill is the expert on this.
One option is to build a building that doesn't look historic. I know I've said this over and over.
Do you want him up in the mic, or are we okay?
I don't know if people on Zoom can hear you, so you really should be near them. Yep.
One option is to build a separate building that you don't try to mimic the historic character, because it ends up looking not historic. They usually come up with a poor rendition. And so that is an option. It could be a very attractive building that they don't try to copy this. They very seldom do it successfully. Just a thought.
Thank you. And I think Ms. Ralph has. Now we need the mic down again.
I don't need that.
Thank you.
If you go with the new building, have you given any thought to where this new building is to go?
Yeah.
Generally.
Right there?
Now, on that
Explain
street.
See the big yellow block?
I understand.
Behind the
Where-
treasurer's
Okay.
office facing Warren Ave
Okay.
is one potential option.
We have 4 acres back there, and it's either that or Amosville, but that would require, the Amosville relocation would require a referendum.
I have 10 acres in Flint Hill. I wish to say that.
That would also require a voter referendum.
I want to second Gary's point, that these are just conceptual at this point. These still are just getting direction, we're going half A or half B. if we do path A, we still have a whole lot of design, a whole lot of decisions yet to make, finalizing exactly where your office is, for example. Run again, all right? And so forth and so on. So there's a lot of issues there, all right?
Okay, so here's what's bottom line this. I mean, Mr. Frazier said a majority needs to provide direction. So thinking ahead, it's May 2022. What do we need to do and when in your view from a board action perspective?
If you're just putting that on me, I mean.
Oh, I'm not.
I'd like it to see it to be both a building committee consensus, or at least unanimous, but we can't really work with Mr. Vaughn of Wiley Wilson much further until we know which plan we're working with.
That's my question. So we would effectively have to vote on whether we want to renovate this building or move to build a new building.
You're gonna renovate this anyway.
Right, but I mean, use this as a courthouse or build a new building.
Correct.
That's the basic vote that we would have to take.
And to build onto this one would require a new admin building, so we're gonna build a new building anyway. But that would be less disruptive overall.
Right, so, I can gather that, kind of this irrevocable, vote to go down a certain path is difficult. So what you could do is authorize the committee to go into these next phases of conceptual and, the next level, planning, study level design, get a better number for construction costs and all that, and say, okay, we've spent some money, it's sunk cost on really analyzing this fork of your decision path, and with this more detailed information, before we go any further and spend any more money, you need to really buy into this fork, knowing that the risk, if you turn back, is that you've then wasted time and some amount of money on those sunk costs.
Yeah. You radar O'Reilly me again. That's what I was looking for. I was just wondering if there's an interim step here.
I would add to that, I think there are going to be a number of times the building committee is going to come back saying we've gotten to this stage of development, we need to approve going to the next step.
True, that would be the proper way to do it.
One shot and then you're not going to hear from it again. I don't know how many it's going to be, but there's going to be a number of decision points as we get there. Just like Gary said, we'll get to the first next level of detail, and then there will be next level of detail. So how do you actually want that building to look?
We don't have an agreement with Wiley Wilson or anybody to design a courthouse. We have an agreement with them to work us through this kind of process to sort out how do you even solve this issue.
Right.
That's all we're contracted for right now.
And then way down the road, you're going to have to vote on the bond issue. Or you're going to have to actually approve a procurement document to go out to hire.
Right.
So there's going to be a whole lot of steps.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clarity on what we need to decide now or in the next month or two.
Wondering, I mean, emotionally, I think that's where we are because we'd like to preserve this building and the Rappahannock look as long as possible, but I myself don't need an artist rendering of what a two-story addition, twice this size on the back of this building is going to be before I make a decision to vote to build a new courthouse, because it's going to look really bad. And I mean, I don't know any other way to do it. You've got to have a space to conduct court in, and it's either add on to this or build a new facility. Again, you can rearrange the way that the addition is back there, but the addition is back there and it's going to disrupt traffic, it's going to disrupt the offices nearby, adjacent to it, and it's also going to cost us a lot of money to pull up and reroute all those utilities.
I'm wondering, does anybody have questions for Wiley Wilson while we have them on the phone?
Sure, I just have one general question. I mean, you can see, I don't know if it's really a debate, but a discussion with this option A and option B, one kind of working with what we have and modifying our existing building or building a new courthouse. I'm just curious, someone mentioned Madison County where they renovated their historic courthouse to work in a kind of modern context. What's, off the top of your head, what have counties done generally in a situation like this? Is it some try to do what Madison County did, or is Madison County an outlier in this regard? Because it sounds like that turned into a huge, big ticket project that went well beyond their cost estimates.
You with us, Randy?
Is that Randy?
Yeah, might be. I can tell you what Gloucester did twice, built a new building. They built one in the early 80s and they built one in 2002. I don't expect we'll be growing anything like they did through the 80s. So they weren't really positioned to add to either of them just because of the way things were set up.
Madam Chair, we have two people's comments or questions back here. If you,
Are you okay with that?
yeah, I am.
Madison County's courtroom, the circuit court, is a third the size of this room from wall to wall.
Wow.
We're a county twice as big, population-wise. And we're still working, maybe if everybody was crowded together, you might get 35 people in the seating area. Very antiquated, out of date. The rest of the courthouse is great. And the beauty over there is each court has a separate courtroom.
Thanks.
Anita, did you have something? No, you're good.
I just have one question. We have been talking about this new courthouse.
Get up to the mic, please, Peggy.
We have been talking about this new courthouse since about a year ago, August of last year, in fact. And not in one time in this whole year that's gone by, I have never heard anything about building another building. My question to the board is the reason we want to move or extend this building out because we want to have more money for another building, when we originally talked about just one building, which was to be a courthouse? What's the motive here?
Well, I'll answer that. The motive is to bring all county staff onto this campus. And so you need a certain number of square feet to do that. That was baked into the
I am not questioning the motive.
So this second building is for the other county staff that are in rented space right now.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But is one hinged on the other?
No,
Is
if
the
you
fact
build a
that-
building big enough for a new courthouse that takes the clerk, your office, and everything in this building and art across the street, then those buildings are freed up to be reused.
Absolutely.
If you don't build a building that big and you just add on to this, then building, office, zoning, myself, we can't move into one of your offices because it's not available. So if we're gonna move, we have to move something.
These are just options, just to.
I understand
Yeah.
these are just options. I just was really, I read what the building committee published about their meetings and what Mr. Glennie talked about here. And I was very surprised to see at the very last page, alternatives. Add on to the courtroom, one. New courtrooms, I don't have my paper with me, but it's the last page. And under that, administration building. I know we need an administration building, believe me. But I know that the only thing that was talked about this first whole year was a courthouse. So it kind of took me by surprise to think, well, and that was why I asked, why all of a sudden are we are changing the plan for a courthouse in which a judge who met with us has kind of rubber stamped to something else? That was the reason I asked the question before.
Can I try and answer that question?
Mr. Glenn?
Yeah, please. I don't know how to do this, but I do.
All right, the building committee had gone through the logic and was at the point of saying that the new courthouse was the right way to go, all right? We brought that to the board for a decision. They asked for more information and other options. And so that's when we developed this other option. And I think what that does is it validates what the building committee had thought before. So to me, we're right back to where we were, but the problem with committees is you get out there way out in front. And we probably got out too far and didn't bring everyone else along with us. And now we've done that. And so you're probably at the same level of assumption or thinking that the building committee is.
Correct.
Which is a courthouse.
Yes.
There's always a courthouse.
That's all I want to hear,
Yeah.
because it seemed that that's
They
not
haven't
where we're
voted,
going.
they haven't, let them vote.
I would just add to kind of what Paige summed up is when we met as a board the month before last, I guess, it's been this year, and asked a couple of critical questions to help us chart our scope of work for the year. And one of the questions was, should we still work on sealing the critical envelopes of the historic buildings? Yes. Should we go ahead and work on the development of the new courthouse? And there was not a consensus to move forward with that without more information about what a renovation and continuing to use this space as court would look like. And so the building committee, in an attempt to get everybody on board and have a successful way forward with consensus, went back and worked through these details. I would say the additional necessary administrative building is, to my mind, a negative consequence of only adding on to this courthouse. And I have never been in favor of only adding on to this courthouse or building an administrative building. I have always been in favor of having a new modern courthouse that met all of the thresholds and checked all of the boxes that it needs to check. And then thoughtfully reviewing and making space for all of our officers and employees that they need, and getting us out of the rental situation that we've been in, where we're essentially wasting money every month.
For 25 plus years.
So that's where we're at and why we went through this exercise. And I think, I don't want to speak for the whole committee, but I don't think any of us particularly liked the addition design. I called it, it reminded me of a shotgun shack. You can fire through the front door and it'll come right out the back of the building because everything's in a line. It's not a very elegant design. But it's part of the exercise to get buy-in from our board members and members of the public, and that makes it a worthwhile exercise. Thank you, Peggy.
All right, so how do we move forward? What are you looking for, Mr. Fraser?
Well, if it's the board's pleasure, we need direction as to which concept we work on, or do we continue working on both and get, some sort of, it's gonna cost money to do that, of course, but we're gonna have to get some sort of facade drawings, elevation drawings, or tighter cost estimates of what one versus the other is, or do we just continue with A or B?
I think the next typical step would be planning study level drawings, I think, from concept level, that a little more detail into floor plan and type of materials in general, and then really getting a floor plan laid out and a site plan laid out so that a more detailed cost estimate could be prepared, which is still going to have a lot of contingency built in because it's still very preliminary.
Is it A or B?
No, I think you would pick one path and do that for it.
Yeah, I don't think we should be
Yeah. No, I don't
continually
think you
working
should.
on two.
Now, it doesn't mean that you can't reject that at a later time. But say, for example, you go down option A, and for whatever reason, the logic is thought, and it's going to be $10.2 billion to do that, you can go back and say, I think we'll add on to the building. Now, I don't think that's likely, but you could. But if you just do it knowing, and I use numbers that are way out of the range of reasonable, so anybody quotes them.
Well, and I hope all of the board members, because you appoint the members of the building committee, have a level of comfort with the path that the building committee is pursuing. And we're not trying to walk you out on a ledge. We're trying to help you succeed. We're trying to help you find the right answers. We're not trying to lead you down, a flowery path and end up with something that's completely unfeasible. So, we're willing to come back and certainly give reports as often as necessary. I think we've done that this year quite a few times already. And we understand that it's a large undertaking. We have a level of expertise on this committee right now that we can get a lot done. So I hope you have faith in us and will allow us to continue with the courthouse design.
Absolutely. Do you need a motion then? Shall I make a motion to?
I'm not sure what you want.
I will make a motion to pursue and explore option A.
Option A, a new building,
Mm-hmm.
a new courthouse building, rather.
Yeah.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
Which means what? I mean, it's seeking, Gary, how did you characterize the planning
study.
Yeah, explore and, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot, as Mr. Glenny pointed out, there's a lot that's gonna go into that. And
Right, I mean,
you'll be
again, it's
periodically
conceptual,
checking
so we may put one,
Yeah.
move it back and forth within the same square walls or rectangular walls or whatever they wind up being. But what,
Would you like me to be more specific about it?
No, I think I get it. I'll second your motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thanks
Thank
for all
you.
your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn the building committee at this point.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving into the local fireworks regulation.
All right, as board members are aware, there's a lot of community interest in a very lengthy fireworks show that occurred a few months back. And as a result of that, there was discussion at your last meeting. The board asked me to work with county attorney, I believe, to develop a draft ordinance. That draft ordinance is provided and attached to this agenda item, which pulled from a few others. You heard from a citizen regarding some of the provisions, and I believe you received some information in the mail. I'd be happy to go through this document in any detail that you would like. As I noted, I guess privately, the way this is set up is Chapter 21 of your code, fire protection, with fireworks being Article 1, allowing you to add other fire protection related articles in the future, whether it be open burning or something, if you chose to do that, and just is a little more flexible for you going forward. The meat of this ordinance is in 21-4, which specifies the issuance of permits and application, and there are several paragraphs that do talk about the time of day and the duration. That question came up. So it's 8 to 11 p.m. except on December 31. You can do it from midnight to 12:15, and 8 to 11. And displays shall not exceed 30 minutes in duration. So you can move those numbers around however the board would like. The citizen input about authorities and who has to sign off on the document, that all seems reasonable to me, but I would like someone else to be able to do the legwork. So they can just bring it to me and explain why it's appropriate to sign. I think we can make those changes pretty easily. Some comments that you received by email talked about the logistical process through which a permit is approved. I don't have any issue with those, and that application is made in duplicate and the county administrator signs that it's approved on it, and then one copy is kept in the county offices and the other copy is provided to the applicant, who would then have it with them to prove that they have an application. That method can work, other methods can work, but if that's what the board wants to do, we can certainly add that in. And there was some question about whether animals should be specifically listed.
Could I interject for a second there? Is, under the insurance requirements, could the county be made a party to that?
Probably not. The
And
State Fire
additional
Prevention
insured-
Code requires $1 million. Unless, I mean, I don't know how the county would be
additional
suffer
insurance?
loss unless it was at our property.
But we represent all the stakeholders in the county.
We can run that down and check with our insurer and see what they say, since they're kind of experts in insurance, and Mr. Goff can look at it from a legal side. The animal thing, I think, is a tricky one. I saw it in some other ordinances, and it was pointed out that Gloucester has in their animal control ordinance that you can't use fireworks, I think, directly in contact or to scare an animal. That gets into a very subjective area, and I want to talk to, how is Art going to use that in court if needed? I mean, if we put something in here, we need to be able to, and somebody scares an animal 10 miles away during a 30-minute show, is that against the law? I think it gets tricky. And that's why I would suggest that you recognize that fireworks are going to make various animals, to include humans, life uncomfortable, and therefore you limit them in time and duration and how often they happen on a parcel, and then possibly add in notification in the paper or other things. Because I don't know that you can cause no harm if harm is considered scaring an animal to happen.
Right.
Well,
it's hard to measure it.
The majority of our horses are retired Confederate cavalry horse reenactment mounts. The other half are not. They normally don't get upset at fireworks except when a former neighbor shot bottle rockets in the field where they were. They were stampeding at night. So, I mean, crazy things can happen.
Yeah, so I imagine on the animal control law side of things, and I'm not very familiar with our section of code related to that, there might be other avenues that if you're intentionally trying to impose harm on livestock or something, it doesn't matter whether you're using a bottle rocket or throwing rocks at them, there's probably something that the sheriff's office and
under the general laws of the
Commonwealth could do. I don't know. But I'd be happy to add anything, and there are many examples, as you've read, and the one written comment that you received by email referenced very carefully all these different ordinances and borrowing language, which certainly you can do.
That probably needs further research, and probably intricate research by Mr. Goff. Why couldn't we do that as a amendment to the ordinance later if necessary? But I think if this is in pretty good form to advertise, why we wouldn't want to go ahead and do it?
Well, there might be some things to change, and like I said earlier, I don't disagree with me having to actually sign off on all permits rather than designating that.
Okay.
So I think some changes maybe would be appropriate. But.
And the wind one, I thought was.
Well,
you do not know? It
Yeah.
seemed pretty reasonable. But
How
if
do you
we had-
measure that? I mean,
So
yeah, I guess that's tough, isn't it?
This is, the language here is a bit subjective right now. You put 15 miles an hour in, now it's no longer subjective.
Well, I guess.
So if somebody's doing something that we think is not very smart, because it's windy, we might be able to shut them down, but if it's 14 miles an hour, then now we can't. So, it
I guess
better be the right number.
Yeah, I guess Northumberland.
Or
has-
then the fire department wants to do their fireworks and it's 15.2, and it's like, nope.
Well, windy and dry is different than windy and normal.
Yeah. So, there are some consequences to a lot of different ways we do this. I like a little more subjectivity, which might make the attorney's job harder if we had to do something.
Yeah.
Chances are, if we go in and shut somebody down, we're going to have the full force of the sheriff's office behind us, and we're going to shut them down. They're going to be really mad, and they may want to take us to court after the fact, but, what we wanted to accomplish was accomplished.
I would just say on the hours that you read, that seems like very strange that they're fine from 8 a.m. till 11 on the 31st, and then from 11 until midnight, you're not allowed to shoot fireworks, and then from midnight until 12:15 a.m., but it doesn't say 12:15 a.m. on January 1st. You're allowed. So I think we should just simplify it, that on December 31st, you're allowed to shoot fireworks or set fireworks off from 8 a.m. in the morning until 12:15 a.m. on January 1st.
Yeah, I just,
Not
I took
continuously.
that totally.
Not continuously,
somebody's
preferably not continuously.
so I guess my question, which I asked Mr. Frazier, I know that Ms. McCon and then Ms. Hunt both have really, I would say, were most vocal and directly affected by this incident. And so they both have provided good input, and Ms. Hunt provided relatively detailed input. And so my question is, do we want to just agree, maybe jettisoning the animal-related language? I think Mr. Curry made a good point there. And then emphasizing the county administrator's sign-off on the permits, and then incorporating the rest of their proposed edits. We could, if we agree to just adopt all those into the draft, we could advertise that.
I think we could, yeah, because if we wait a month to look at a draft again and then advertise for public hearing, we would be adopting something shortly before, or maybe after they actually apply for a permit for July 4th.
The only other thing in the draft was the
the
15 miles an hour thing is written in here.
I would strike that.
It already says, such as high winds and low humidity. I think it gives us more flexibility. It might not give citizens the comfort that we would view things as dangerously as they would.
Right.
But like I said, if it's over 15 and there's complaints, and we might have to shut down the July 4th fireworks.
Again, site-specific. I mean, you look at Benvenue, where the fire department has traditionally been shutting off the fireworks lately. That's not the same as near a wooded area. I mean,
Sure, I know, but it just says if wind speeds are 15 miles per hour or greater at the display time of fireworks event, the event shall be canceled.
And then
Pretty absolute.
Yeah.
Ms. McCon was also focused on the public notice provision of this, so where do we stand on that?
I mean, I don't have an issue with a newspaper notice. It might require backup more than 30 days prior to show, as applications due maybe 60 days before a show or something like that.
Okay.
If you want to have, the application fee priced enough to cover ads.
For sure, it should
2
be.
weeks or something like that.
I mean, we have to do the state code requires a notification in zoning or planning commission things for up to a mile. I don't know why we couldn't do that in this ordinance.
Well, it's really complicated. And you
Understand
can put
it's-
that on the applicant.
Somebody might get missed, but the neighbors are getting it further out than next door or adjacent properties, and neighbors will likely talk to one another. If somebody gets missed, it'll be known.
Yeah, neighbor notification like you do for a telecommunications tower, 1 mile. That's a fair amount of work that the zoning administrator works with the applicant and the commissioner of revenue to identify every parcel, and it's just a lot of work. Putting something in a newspaper, not a lot of work. Notifying adjacent property owners, not a lot of work.
If you're gonna build something, you get a zoning permit, you gotta post it in a place that's visible from the main road that goes by there. It might be a cheap alternative.
Yeah.
You require the applicant.
Well, that's a good idea.
Post a sign or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, a posted sign, I mean, that would be a pretty good idea, yeah.
Yeah, then that's government speak is exempted from the sign ordinance, so you can put a big sign that says
If you want to change it to 45 days instead of 30, that gives us time to put it in the paper, gives them time to get a sign up.
If 45 is adequate, yeah, that's fine with me.
There was one other thing I saw in the Albemarle ordinance which seemed like a decent idea, which was that it was the site of whatever engagement or how, where they're being set off, you had to be 100 feet from fuel tanks. Which seemed reasonable to me.
And that very well may be in the
But I don't know,
state
something
fire
about it.
prevention code.
100 feet from where?
Fuel tanks.
Fuel
Fuel
tank, but
tanks.
it's specifically in the Albemarle ordinance. So I didn't know if that's something that, I mean, it would make sense to do that.
It does seem logical.
And the neighbors could move a fuel tank right up to the line.
So are we saying sign in lieu of newspaper notice, or?
Or maybe sign and newspaper
I
in lieu
think-
of
I think sign
notifying
and
anybody
newspaper.
within a mile.
Yeah, sign in
Well,
newspaper.
I can see your problems with that, and I don't want to create a problem like that. So if we had signage, notification, and the paper, that'd probably be,
Yeah, It's not unlike, yeah, like any kind of zoning application, special use permit or whatever. Well, no, those don't have, there's
They
no
don't
sign.
have- We are intending to do, even though it's not required, but.
Yeah, okay. All right, clear as mud.
So, we're not putting in a fixed wind speed?
I don't think so.
It does give you discretion, right? It doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right, okay.
Yeah, right now it's,
If we deem it dangerous.
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I can and will incorporate, I'm not sure if I'll use this exact language, but something similar about how application is made, that I sign off on it, et cetera.
Yep,
Some of
that's
those other
important.
things.
Yep.
And for right now, not including the animals, but
I
that's
agree with
something
that.
that we can run down overall.
Right. And then sign a newspaper.
One thing I forgot to mention to you before, I'm sorry, is you're not gonna be required to have staff on board, or the sheriff's not gonna require to have staff present for every single one of these things to make these decisions. Is that correct?
The way it's set up now is, I believe we might require that to happen.
Such
At
conditions.
the cost of, on the applicant's cost to make sure fire or law is there depending on the application.
So we got $1 million by state code.
By state code.
Liability, and you have a pyrotechnician
That's state code.
The state code.
Yep.
And so to go beyond that in this ordinance, do we need to look at, can we make an argument that there's enabling legislation?
Yeah.
To allow us to do that?
15.2 is pretty loose in what it says. It states that shall have the power to provide the issuance of permits and the display of fireworks by fair associates, these people, those people, the other people, and any additional terms and conditions as may be prescribed by the locality.
Okay.
That's the direct
So we're
quote.
gonna hang our hat on that?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, is the provision of a supervisor, a governmental supervisor, do we really need to look at that a little?
Others have done it. I wouldn't want it to be a mandate in the ordinance, but I would like it to be identified as a tool that we might require on a case-by-case situation.
Just to give you the authority
Right.
to hit them with it?
Right.
I think that's smart.
And that's in G, the county administrator may specify.
Yep, may. And then if we think it's particularly concerning, then we can say, you can only do this if
Right.
you go pay one of our volunteer companies to be there and you pay
There
an
you go.
off-duty police officer to
There
be
you
there.
go, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good approach.
But knowing that it's only 30 minutes long, that takes a lot of pressure off of,
Right.
and it also says you can only do 2 per year per parcel, right?
Per parcel or per
Per parcel. So you can't just have this parcel that does it every month.
I think that's
30
good.
minutes every month or every day, or
Yep. This
you
is
get 2
good.
per year. And that probably works with your volunteer agencies.
And the scaring the animal part, that's kind of subjective.
Very subjective.
And it's gonna
Hard to
be
prove.
a causal nightmare. I mean, how are you gonna prove there wasn't a rattlesnake in the
Yeah.
field that scared the,
Right.
Yep.
horse, or wasn't the burst of, a shell a quarter mile away?
Right, so amping up the notification side helps that.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So, I guess the intent I'm hearing then is to incorporate these changes and then prepare a public hearing notice for June. And I'll try to get these changes wrapped in quickly, and not that I'm asking for a determination, but I'll kick it back out to the board, and I'll let you tell me if I've heard you wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Chester Gap Volunteer Fire Department EMS Program Update. We did have a call, well, I was on the phone. Gary was in person.
Everybody was in person.
Everybody else was in person with Warren County and Chester Gap. And there is an attached recommended, which one is that? Resolution, MOA.
Yes, so the conversation with Chair Colors from Warren County, Chief Bonzano, Assistant Chief Mateko, something like that. Chief Brown, President Rea, and County Administrator Daly and myself met at Chester Gap. Ms. Donahue was on the phone because she was out of town, and talked through the program up until that has been in place for the last several years. The conversation focused on, let's see if I summarize it here. Conversation focused on several items. One, there was a discussion about, that was instigated by some discussion here. What is the plan? What is the intent? Is this a temporary thing? Is it not a temporary thing? If it's not a temporary thing, the bodies, the Board of Supervisors for Rappahannock County and Warren County, in moving forward, if it's not a temporary thing, should say that. And their recommendation of the group is that this model has proven itself to be a cost-efficient and sustainable model, and you'll see that in the fourth whereas paragraph. To identify this is not intended to be a temporary thing. It is suggested to be a way to resolve this issue in that area of the two counties for going into the future. However, still to come to the boards on an annual basis, and that annual review would start in January of each year to provide plenty of time, and that is a difference from what was previously discussed. The other changes discussed memorialize some of what Mr. Daly and I discussed together as we entered the budget process, and that was that there should be a cost share, and it should be based on the number of calls that's identified, as well as the cost of workers' compensation, which should be included in that cost share. That's been added. So the cost share percentage, 60-40, as identified herein, based on the data that I shared previously, would be for this year only, and then if this goes forward, it would be reviewed on an annual basis to adjust that 60-40 to whatever is happening at that time. The overall cost of this for Rappahannock County would be up to $121,600, and that's consistent with what was incorporated in the draft budget that's available for your consideration later today. I think I covered all the high points of that conversation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure Chair Donahue could as well.
I guess the one question, if I recall correctly, that came out of our last discussion of this was the extent to which there could be any fine tuning of the 60-40 split, which I think was where we started the agreement, sort of in principle. So I just wonder what discussions.
Yeah, past years it was 50-50, right. And looking at the last 2 full calendar years and part calendar year, that broke down to just about 60-40. It was.
You're talking call volume.
Call volume.
Right.
When you take FAUCURE out of the equation, which is mutual aid, the call volume in Warren County is approximately 60% of all calls, and Rappahannock is 40% of all calls. Different now is that the Warren County medic crew that was running into Rappahannock in past years really hasn't been since you entered the FY22 agreement, when this crew now includes 1 BLS member and 1 ALS member. So the medic unit is not coming in. The Warren County medic unit is not coming into the county anymore.
It can, it's just.
It can, if they're both busy, or it takes, maybe there's an accident with 2 or 3 people, it might, depending on the availability of Washington, Amosville.
Do we have any indications how the installation of the centrally located paid responders is handling or contributing to calls in the Company 4 and Company 9 areas?
They're dispatched on all calls and are able to be released from that call by a medic unit, not a BLS unit, by a medic unit who is en route or at scene. So recently, this morning, for example, both 9 and ALS 1400 were on the scene of an issue in that Huntley area. They both went to the scene, both provided service, and both went in service with a patient refusal. And it's really up to the medic unit from the volunteer company to determine the severity of the call and whether they will place our county unit in service or not. I hope that answered your question.
I think I mean, realizing that the central paid response is relatively new and there's probably not a pool of data to see how that has been working countywide. It's probably about as good an answer as I could hope to get.
Mr. Polster and I did discuss his quarterly reports that he prepares for the companies. The county department will be added to that report, so you'll see the number of calls and response time and all that, just like you would for every other company. But he's going to work on some more detailed information to try to identify how often they're placed in service, how many days a week they're covering right now versus not covering. 4 more employees are going through background review right now. So he's filling out his crew pretty well, and now we're on that edge where we don't want to hire too many people because then the people you have aren't going to get enough work. So trying to balance it, get every day covered while still providing meaningful work for the ones that join us, if that makes sense. And they're working 24-hour shifts.
So the one question I had asked, and I know there's some data here, maybe you can just summarize it for me at a high level, is a question of from Chester Gap, how much activity, how much call activity is occurring for the Chester Gap paid people that's well beyond Chester Gap? I mean, what do we see there? And how far are they reaching into the county?
Until the box assignments are completely updated into the computer dispatch system, they are dispatched as a first due staffed unit on all calls down to Massey's Corner. They are first due for only a part of what was Company 4's EMS first due, which is split between 1, 3, and 9 right now. The former second due companies are now first due in that area. So, except for because 9 is staffed, they are going a little bit further. That will likely stop once the boxes are all loaded into the system.
And with Company 4 EMS currently offline, and the fact that they're in a position to cover that area, I think kind of answers the question.
Right. Well, and we want redundancy, and there's a lot of drawbacks to having currently 5 volunteer EMS companies and 1 paid chase vehicle, but there are a lot of benefits to doing that too, and the main benefit is redundancy. And having multiple, when you have a significant incident or you have many incidents happening during a similar time, you have several different agencies that can backfill into another area of the county if they have to.
And I do hear from citizens in Wakefield that are concerned about 4 and the situation, and concerned if they're going to be covered or not. And I've told them with the 24/7 Chester Gap, with 1, 3, and the Chase Buggy, the citizens in the Wakefield district and beyond, I think, are in very good shape at this point.
Is there an opportunity, even though, as we say, Company 4 is offline, knowing that Company 4 and Company 9 are nearby, does not having that licensing as a company prohibit those individuals from volunteering at Company 9?
One EMT with Company 4 who received training and not quite released yet indicated that they might join 9 to get some calls. But as of recently, there were no released EMTs at Company 4.
Okay,
So that opportunity is somewhat limited.
thank you.
Yeah, I read and maybe it's been answered before, but I read where taken out of the equation are the mutual aid calls into Falk Year. Do you have any idea how many of those actually are?
That was just for statistics. It is on this chart. So Fauquier, you can see here annually, not very many. So in 21 totally, there were 14 out of that Company 9 was sent on. Fauquier and Culpeper, in doing their box assignments, they had some of the areas with first due from our companies. We know Culpeper has 3 as a first due in a big area. And they're not hesitant at all to call our units. We get way down the run order today before we call anybody from anybody. And those are some of the changes that the association didn't like very much, that the science showed that the nearest vehicle or unit should be dispatched on the call, whether that's Culpeper or send it Sperryville to Viewtown Road. Whoever's closest should go to the call. And those are some of the changes that are working their way into the box assignments.
Right, but I believe the nearest Fauquier units are far from the edge of Fauquier County that can be served easily from our companies.
Yeah, that's probably why 9 is being sent to areas.
Yeah, I'm not
just to
sure
rely
that
upon
was,
Huntley.
set up purposely like that. It's just the way it happened, I
Yeah.
guess.
Sure. And if Fauquier is closest in another area, we would want them getting to our citizen as soon as possible.
Okay. I'll go ahead and put forward a motion to authorize Ms. Donahue to execute an agreement on behalf of the board with Chester Gap Volunteer Fire Department to extend the paid EMS provider program, which is a fiscal year-based agreement, correct?
Yes.
So that'd be for the 23 fiscal year?
Yes. And the draft agreement, as provided and shown, would start the consideration of the next year in January.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote?
That's why I have it set up on the agreement, which really is, that would be best.
Mr. Frazier?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Whitson?
Aye.
Mr. Carney?
Aye.
And I also. Thank you.
Thank you for your work on that.
And thanks to Chief Brown and Company 9.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Donahue. Thank you.
Budget work session.
Yep.
You want a 5-minute break?
That'd be
before-
great.
Let's do that.
I forgot.
So I told him.
Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Grimsley's hung around for some reason, I'm not sure.
I don't know
Ms.
why.
Cricks is online for some reason. Might have something to do with the next agenda.
All right, budget work session, everyone.
Board members are aware at your last budget work session, there was discussion about several budget items that board felt perhaps could be changed from the most recent version. Very, very high-level summary of that was that there was an opportunity to recognize revenue a little bit higher in a few revenue lines, meals and lodging, sales tax, and a couple others, and to balance that off, reduce the personal property tax rate just a little bit lower. And so that's been done, and a few other tweaks here and there as requested were completed. There is a budget adoption candidate online with today's date, as well as resolutions to adopt that budget, set the tax rate for calendar year 2022, and then appropriate funds. If you wanted to, you could hold off on appropriating funds if you wanted to. It really doesn't make much of a difference because those funds aren't available till FY23 July 1 anyway. The school budget must be adopted by May 15th, and the state's done us a terrible disservice because there could be changes. There will be changes. How drastic they are, we don't know. The resolutions that are prepared each identify the revenue included in these in the budget for schools from the different sources as the basis for this document. And if that revenue doesn't come in, then the commitments are contingent on those. Mm-hmm. So you might have to go back up and do some minor adjustments if the state tweaks things a little bit or a lot of it. Some localities are thinking about waiting until the state does their thing. Others, for example, our two partners in the regional jail, Shenandoah, adopted their budget and they're done. Warren said, well, I think we're going to wait and see what the state does. Either works, and for the schools, you must do it by the 15th anyway.
Okay.
So.
And these are roll call votes and 3 separate resolutions, right?
Correct, and I've listed them in the order. You should take them: budget, taxes, appropriation.
Well, and I want to thank my colleagues in working together to get the tax rates to where they are. So in summary, and I just reviewed the the budget that is now in front of us for adoption, and I see that the real property tax rate is at 55 cents. The real property portion of the fire levy tax is at 5 cents, and the personal property tax is at $3.10. And I think that that's good news for our taxpayers. And again, thank my colleagues for working together to get to that level, and Mr. Curry for all your work on the budget, and to Miss Nick and Miss Graham as well for all their background work. I'll put forward a motion that we adopt the resolution approving the fiscal year budget beginning July 2022 and ending June 30, 2023, as presented in our meeting packet.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just did want to make one last kind of pitch that we consider level funding the schools and taking the personal property rate down to $3 even, from $3.10. And I know I had talked about that early on, and we made some increases on our expected revenue side, but we didn't cut any expenditures. And I think that's a really reasonable one. It's a small amount in a large budget. And I believe my peers know, and I believe our peers at the school know, that should anything ever happen and it really be a matter of $70,000 is absolutely needed, that we would certainly make that happen. But $3 is a very tempting number to try to reach.
Excuse me, what would level funding do to the school budget?
It would be a difference of $72,000.
Are there any new positions in this current budget, the proposed budget you have? No. Administrative positions? No administrative positions.
No, the extra positions.
Shannon.
Sorry. We added additional instructional support positions using ESSER funds, and also additional mental health positions to deal with some of the gaps. So those are temporary, using ESSER funds depending on how well we meet the gaps there. But insurance was our biggest increase that we had to deal with, and that's an ongoing expenditure. We did pass on some of the premium increase to our employees. I know the county did not do that. So we did, even on individual subscribers. So they're already picking that up, and that's where we saw that $72,000 to try to balance that out as best we could to minimize the impact of a 10.5% increase. So it'll be difficult. We got it as tight as we could, but thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
So 10 cents, so we did determine after going back and forth that a penny on personal property is $7,200, right?
Approximately.
I mean, that's just for this go-round. I don't think it's as static as real estate is.
Right.
Right, that's just for the 101 million revenue number.
Wherever that ends up next year.
Yeah. It will be different.
I mean, in my mind's eye, I was kind of headed to $3 as well.
I know we have everything drawn up in front of us for $310, and it's a difference of $70,000. I mean, it's just one of those things we talked about but not gone back to get, and so I just wanted to mention it again today.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Mr. Frazier. Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Whitson.
Aye.
Mr. Carney.
Aye.
And I also.
I can just keep rolling along just to keep our meeting going. So I think we've all acknowledged where we end up on the tax rate, so I'll put forward a motion that we adopt the resolution imposing tax levies upon real estate and for tangible personal property. And this is a calendar year based set of tax rates for calendar year 2022.
And I'll just add and make sure it's clear, as was discussed and advertised further down in the be yet further resolved, you'll see a rate of $0 per 100 assessed value
Yep.
for the one vehicle of a volunteer fire rescue member or auxiliary member.
I have a motion.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote again. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Whitson.
Aye.
Mr. Carney.
Aye.
And I also.
I'll go ahead and put forward a motion that we adopt the resolution appropriating funds for the fiscal year budget beginning July 1, 2022 and ending June 30, 2023.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Mr. Frazier.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Whitson.
Aye.
Mr. Carney.
Aye.
And I also.
Thanks again, everyone. I learned a lot this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curry.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Thank you, Ms. Nick, who
Thank you, Dr.
isn't here.
And thank you,
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Grimsley.
Dr. Grimsley.
Thank you.
Perhaps the most complicated budget of all.
All right. Rolling right along. Town of Washington requests footpath easement.
Footpath.
That would be great.
It's too far. There will be no footbaths.
Darn it.
Madam Chair, if I could, this board, I believe, and I can stand to be corrected, but I believe we approved looking at a temporary footpath, but these easements are perpetual that they have drawn up in these documents. And I think before we go any further with that they're talking about starting this monument and heading back here. We're talking about a building program back here. I think this should be somehow marked with paint or something so that we all know what we're actually looking at before we go any further, because now it's not temporary, it's perpetual.
Mr. Goff and I touched on that, and that's something that Mr. Krim suggested, that perhaps the graphic here on the screen would be good enough to show where the path went, and Mr. Goff and I said, no.
No.
If this is
Well, not
going
for
to
me,
be,
I appreciate that,
if this is
gentlemen,
going to
I
be a
really do.
perpetual easement, then there needs to be a clear plat, and I said, Racy has done a recent plat, has topo, you're welcome to use that base, I'll put you in touch with them, you can buy yourself a plat. Now, with respect to the deed, it is perpetual, but it does say that if we want to use the space, they have to move their path.
It also says that nothing can be constructed over it without mutual agreements from the two parties. So if we're going to go any further, we need to have that delineated somewhat better than this.
I don't disagree, and so neither Mr. Goff nor I thought that you would want to grant any approval for this today. This is your opportunity to review it. It changed up to just before the meeting when I was able to get, over the weekend, dig into some older emails, when VACORP responded to my question of this paragraph number 6 that's shown. We want the liability to be conveyed to the town to the greatest extent allowed by law, and asked for their understanding with wording, and so they provided their recommendation, which is shown in this version 3, to affect that. But Mr. Frazier is correct that the way that's set up, and you don't have to agree to a permanent easement.
Right now, I did send to Mr. Krim my suggested language for paragraph 8, and they have agreed to incorporate that. And what it says now is whenever the grantor approves plans for construction of any new building that will overlap with this easement, grantor shall promptly notify the town. the town shall then relocate the easement to another location with the concurrence of the grantor, that's us, the grantor's board, which concurrence shall not be unreasonably withheld. In other words, we can't just say, no, you can't have it anymore at all. We'll have to make a reasonable accommodation to put the easement somewhere else. But I told Mr. Krim that there was no way that I could recommend to my client that they agreed to have the town have the power to veto the location of any new building on our land.
Right.
And they understood that, and that's why they came back and added this language back into paragraph 8, which I'm okay with, to recommend this to you all now.
Some of those preliminary layouts for a new building conceive perhaps an entrance road out to Warren Avenue.
Exactly.
And if that's done, then a walking path or sidewalk alongside of that, fine. But it can't be down the middle of the road.
Well, then I need to add that approves plans for construction of any new building or other.
Yeah.
But I still think that they should mark it some kind of way with the, paint.
And I think that's.
They don't have to do solid lines the entire distance, but just some sort of.
Flagging.
Anything, yes, flagging anything that could be considered temporary, but that we could also review so that we have a really good idea where it's going.
For my benefit, can you explain why we would need to give them an easement in perpetuity, and if we could not do it a temporary one?
Well, we could give them what's called a license, which is temporary. We could give an easement that's bounded by a certain amount of years. But I think their concern is they're going to incur some capital expense to bridge some of the wetlands that they potentially are going to go over. And I think they want the easement so that, I would assume, I'd have to ask Mr. Krim, I'm not speaking for him, that it may have something to do with potentially funding for some of this stuff, where they're going to have a perpetual easement, maybe to borrow money. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But I haven't had an opportunity to ask Mr. Krim or the mayor why they think they need an actual deed of easement, a permanent professional deed of easement.
A reasonable response would be no, 20 years. Or something like that.
Well, the path seems like a great idea, but we're in the middle of figuring out what we want to do with our building complex.
Sure.
And so why would we want to do this?
Well, because they say
seems-
if you put a building in, as Mr. Goff stated, perhaps a road, make sure that's covered. If it conflicts with the path, then town move your path.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's
But
that
we'll
easy,
allow you to move
is
your
it that
path.
easy?
Well,
Or is it like one of these things where it's like, oh man, why did we do that?
It conflicts, it conflicts with the road going out to Warren Avenue from the new building.
Yeah. Now, and so how does it work during construction and there's some more work that needs to be done on this conflict of, courthouses and roads don't just show up overnight, right?
Right.
So you're gonna have a time period where there's construction activity and these path is gonna cross the construction activity? Is that a problem?
Is that going to violate our covenants?
Right.
So we need to make sure all those things are covered.
Enjoyment and use of it.
And just not to miss the forest for the trees, so since the post office opened, they still aren't accepting credit cards, by the way, but once they are accepting credit cards, once they figure out that difficult technology, then more people will be using the post office. But for the time being, people are walking on the side of Warren Avenue.
There was somebody walking today when I drove.
Yeah, and it's not
carrying a box along the side of the road.
It's not good.
Yeah.
It's not good, and so people are walking with their back to traffic, and we
Well,
could.
they can construct that part now.
True. Yeah.
That was my thought on this, is there are parts of this project that the town doesn't need our approval to undertake, and maybe they should take a phased approach. And I'm concerned, looking at this design, that at some point we are going to come to cross purposes, and we are going to regret a decision that we have made.
So that's always the case with an easement. You're right.
I have a lot of respect for my peers on the town council trying to meet a need of their citizens and be proactive about it. But I don't see how we do this without creating a problem for ourselves.
And I do believe the Black Kettle project has some sort of path. It may not be around parcel 1 and parcel 2, but there was gonna be some sort of almost all the way
I
around
think that's more
path.
down here somewhere.
So like this blue drawing, the segment that's really, it's from there to there, right? That's the.
Our line is somewhere around here. Runs it's right near this tree and it kind of cuts through
If
here.
it's super temporary gravel and all of a sudden we jump into construction, then they have to understand that that's gonna go away, right?
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we authorized earlier, but now they're talking something totally different.
And there might be a period of time where no path exists because of construction, and
Right.
that needs to be baked in.
Yep.
It does, because, you're right, it's gonna be shut down, and that's gonna conflict with the part that we're guaranteeing their use and enjoyment of it, and that's just not possible.
And you'll have major trucks going in and out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, also, we should have total flexibility with the building project.
Yeah, we
No-
should
no
give up any of
encumbrance
that.
by-
Right.
I mean, we're doing this for the entire county, which includes the town residents, but we can't impede the construction because of a path that's used by 20 people.
So
a
as
week.
Mr. Goff said, you could grant a license, and still in that license probably shed liability that would not have any longstanding obligation.
Yeah.
Or you could approve an easement that has much better protection during the construction period of any project that you do, and then it has a fixed window that can be renewed at mutual
Well, we
concurrence.
put language in there for temporary closure.
Yeah.
And, reserve that right at our total and complete discretion. So even more and more, it sounds more and more like a license than it is an easement. So maybe, the board should have a sense of the board that staff respond to them and say that the board has some major concerns about a permanent easement, and that we would, welcome a second proposal of either a temporary, bounded in years easement with provisions for construction and/or a license that also has provisions for construction, and also the liability concerns that Bay Corp raised.
Yeah, I mean, a gravel path that can be shut down like that works for us. And as Mr. Carney said, then it doesn't encumber our ability to move nimbly. I mean, once we get rolling on construction.
Their problem is they're proposing to build pedestrian bridges. And so that's gonna be, I think, expensive.
I think you're right.
On that segment?
$1,000.
No, not on that segment, I can see, but
There's probably a boardwalk through here, it's pretty mushy.
Yep.
But I know they got some other stuff down here, but this would be the area, and the gravel's not free. So I agree that they wouldn't want to have the expectation they're gonna put 15 grand out, and then tomorrow you're gonna say, well, that was fun, we're done.
Yeah.
So they want some assurance just like you do, and they probably take a little back and forth to work that out.
Wouldn't it be much cheaper for them, though, to just come straight down Warren Avenue from the corner of Gay Street up there?
Well, I think ultimately a sidewalk along there makes the most sense, it's grade challenged. If you remember through here, it's a pretty good slope up to that parcel, so it'd take a bit of earthwork.
How wide's the right of way? That may be the part of the concern.
No idea. Well, they can talk to the church. They want an easement.
Well, I think a path is a great idea, just if we can figure out that bit right there so
No.
that we can.
Our staff would love to have a quick path from,
Sure.
here to the post office too. I don't know how many would choose to walk versus drive, but the opportunity that it ties into where county staff is.
Yeah, as long as we have total control over it and it's something that can be easily shut down. So that we can do what we need to do.
So what do you want us to do? You want us to just fire back to Mr. Krim, their lawyer, and say, hey, we've talked about it, and we propose that we give you a temporary license for a span of 20 years or 25 years, but put in all that construction closure language and also the liability language? Is that what you want us to do?
So what's the legal effect of this notion of a license and?
Well, see, if it's an easement, it's forever.
It's recorded in.
Until the parties agree to take it away.
No way.
But it's like the same as a grant of, essentially, they get the permanent access over the fee simple property owned by this county for the purposes enumerated in this document.
So license can be construed as almost temporary use until.
Yeah, a license is the same as like, okay, I'll give you this slip of paper that says you have the right to hunt turkeys on my acreage.
Perfect analogy.
For the 2022 spring gobbler season.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you. A lot of turkeys. It's on the record too. Yes.
Yeah.
So it's very limited, and whereas an easement like this is a permanent right forever.
Why would, okay, all right.
So both the
Mr.
license-
Krim noted that he's done some things similar for a different client in a different scenario where there's town, county, or something like that.
Okay.
He probably just leaned on what he'd done before.
I mean, it's a good idea as long as it's a hyper temporary.
Okay, so is that?
Is that a oxymoron?
Temporary and flexibility.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the sense of the board?
Temporary
that
Yeah,
they
I
proceed
mean,
along?
everyone wins.
Not
on that side.
antagonistically, but just, hey, look, we have some concerns because we have plans.
Yeah.
And we,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we can't make plans if we do something like that. It's
I would-
pretty difficult.
I think whoever is working on this path should come talk to the building committee.
Well, we also want to see it flagged, right? We want to see.
I want to see it
Yeah.
flagged. And I
Flagged.
think, I mean, you developed a committee to handle your, infrastructure, building, and grounds related issues. And this is certainly a grounds issue.
You really leave a lot to the imagination.
I think so. I can concur with my colleague. If y'all want to, that would at least, maybe we can do some of the legwork for the board.
Sure.
Well, and we would know what their design, the desires that they were hoping to accomplish in building it, and maybe some of it can be a part of the courthouse design.
Yeah.
We would want to make sure it's complementary.
Probably
Fill 'em in on
on
that,
on at least the conceptual part.
Right.
So I guess what I'm hearing is Art and I will talk to them about the legal side and have them talk to the building committee about the logistics about where it would go and all that
I
stuff.
guess that's how you bifurcate it, yeah.
And who asks for the flagging? Is that you guys or you guys?
So
You'll take care of that. Okay,
Great.
excellent.
Just make sure, I mean, since I represent this area, I just want to be clear, at least from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense from a public safety standpoint. So I don't want them to be left with the impression that we're being obstructionist. It's just, we got bigger
stuff
fish to
coming.
fry,
Yep.
and we want people off the road for the time being until they figure out their sidewalk plan.
Yeah.
So while we do that, just make sure that we're, as Mr. Carney said, we're not encumbered in any way.
Well, it's easier to work together now before we bring bulldozers in
Absolutely.
than
Yeah.
later on when
Yeah.
everybody's committed to a course of action.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, since legal counsel is here, I was just wondering if we could make a decision right now what agenda matters we could condense or.
I think the rest is probably not too lengthy. Probably push through it pretty quickly.
Okay. I was just bringing that up because I know that we might spend some time in closed session.
All right, let's keep rolling if everybody's good. The water resource protection and monitoring.
Yes, Mr. White spoke with you at your, maybe the last meeting, about a groundwater monitoring elevation well for DEQ that would be in position for a long time, so you could get some historical context of groundwater elevations. I shared with him several properties that were either owned by the county or other public agencies. He shortlisted those into two potential candidates, which would be your county parcel here, which he thought was pretty good because there isn't a lot of well use nearby that would influence it. And looking at the site, I pointed him towards the other side of the communications tower because I thought it was fairly well protected from future development. The second would be at the county ball field property behind the elementary school in the back corner. There are a couple documents attached showing his analysis of those two sites. No decisions need to be made today. He will be working on some agreements that would need to be approved by the board to authorize a long-term installation.
That would probably be a long-term easement there.
Yes, yeah.
So they have easements.
Exactly. And so you can see, this is the old jail sheriff's office, and then here's the little tower building. The tower and the spot is right up on the back side.
That's cool.
So our property line is down here. Keeping it tight to this would allow a road back here if we ever wanted one. And it's a lot likely we'll have to build anything right near that tower, and we'll want that tower to be there for a long time as well. So that's why I thought that site would be good. And it protects all of this space over here, and then the space between the buildings where some parking's been.
Does it, to play devil's advocate, obviously you have a town with a lot of pavement versus a ball field with a lot of grass. I mean, does that matter?
No, he's, because he's looking at bedrock zone, it's really not about recharge here.
Okay.
The other site, the ball field site as he called it, there's the auxiliary gym, the main field, and then this little kind of area tucked in back here, there appears to be a soccer field. And so access to this is a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
And he didn't think this was quite as good because there is an existing well right here.
I see.
And it might influence the water elevation there.
That's really cool.
So he just wanted to share these with you, just as a preliminary idea. You can read through these and talk to constituents or whatnot, think about it. And then at a future date, he'll bring forward some documents to potentially nail it down.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Thanks for getting this going.
And, perhaps the building committee will want to look over this as well, just to triple. I don't think he would have any issue with moving this dot around at all over here. I mean, he'd put it anywhere up
want to
here.
tell a geologist where to drill a hole.
Yeah, his biggest issue is you got to get the drill rigs in place, and there has to be enough room for that.
Right.
And then proximity of other wells. So, but if the building committee thought a better spot in this general area would make sense.
Sounds good.
Only if we hire a dizer.
So that's that.
Thank you.
The new business item regarding budget, we've had a request for a true-up resolution from the school board. It recognizes all of the federal and state money they are actually receive and the amount of ESSER 3 and 2 funding that they will actually use, as opposed to what they predicted they might use at the beginning of the fiscal year. So that will require supplemental appropriation to get our books straight. That total is $500,000, so it's more than your 1%, so it must have a public hearing, and just wanted to provide some advance notice that I'll be advertising that to occur at your June meeting. And this might change a little bit. Miss Nick and Miss Witt are working together just to fine tune all the accounts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board committee reports. Building committee.
Madam Chair, you saw the work that we did this past meeting, so we have now our work cut out for us in more detail. And that's essentially it, I guess.
Thank you for all your work.
Thank you
It's a
for the
huge
board for
project.
allowing us to make the presentation.
Recreational Facilities Authority.
So we had insurance come out. Since we switched insurance, we had VACOR come out and take a look at the park and take a look at the playground structures, and they made some recommendations, starting with mulching, and then maybe looking at the old wooden pirate ship, which is long outdated and has some safety concerns, but he made very practical suggestions, and we will work through those. Other than that,
Super successful fodder stack.
yes, super
Yes.
successful fodder stack. I think it was 320
Crazy.
plus registrants or
Yep.
something. It was a great day.
Great
It was
day.
Fantastic. So thank you to everybody for doing that. And thank you to Jonathan Moore for
Yeah.
heavy hitting on that, as
Wow.
he does.
For many
So thank you.
years.
Yep.
Public safety, do you have the date of our next meeting by any chance?
No, I don't know that it's, I can't recall whether, I
Okay.
believe we did set it, so I'll
think we
make
did that,
sure
can't
Sean and
remember.
I get that out.
Okay. Rules Committee,
Did not meet.
Planning Commission.
Planning Commission, we had I try to keep those planning commission meetings pretty short. That one, just had a lot going on and it wasn't. So you've all read about probably or heard about the Chester Gap Baptist Church application. So we sent that on to the Board of Zoning Appeals with a recommendation for approval, and I believe the BZA is scheduled up for a public hearing. And we had also a public hearing on this draft ordinance that'll come before us shortly, and that's on limited golf driving ranges and ag areas. And so that's been sent on to the Board of Supervisors in, I think, complete form, and the Planning Commission worked it over pretty thoroughly. We had a couple of tourist home applications, and one I should mention to you is behind, you'll know the property just in Old Hollow next to Roy's Orchard. So, right. Yeah, so
That's unfortunate.
just giving you a heads up on that. And there was one other tourist home application. I'm trying to remember. Oh, I know. Yeah, it was an accessory dwelling unit and a very complete application. So we sent that on to the BZA with a recommendation for approval. And then notably this Wednesday, we're having our second work session to continue to go through the draft sign ordinance. And we've been doing that in a systematic way. And I think our last work session was pretty successful. So we're just simply going section by section, so hopefully we'll have that completed and moved on to the Board of Supervisors this summer. So I really applaud everyone on the Planning Commission for how seriously they're taking that work and for their dedication to come out for additional work sessions to get the job done. So that's all I have.
Fire Levy Board?
Not me.
Okay. All right, we've got reports. Anything?
If you haven't looked at the tax revenue for sales tax and meals and lodging, still fairly strong. This was closing another quarter for meals and lodging, see it relative to the past quarters. And sales tax continues to exceed what we've seen same month last year. Imagine that'll come into maybe a more reasonable increase over time, which you can see here. Not a huge increase over last year. We're starting to maybe get into some more realistic expectations. These 2 months are usually our lowest because they're 2 months back. Just after Christmas, everybody did all their spending and then they're on pause. Everything else, the treasurer's reports look good.
Okay.
If it pleases the other members of the board, I'd move that we I'd make a motion that we revisit the additional reports and matters presented by the board at the end of the evening session so we can go into closed session.
Sure, I'll second your motion.
Mr. Whitson.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Can I just get some clarity when in the evening session you want to take those up?
Move it to the end of, well, I don't think we should make anybody sit through them, so I would make them go between item P, old business, and Q, new business.
So we'll just say after old business.
That's correct.
Excellent. All right. We did vote, and everybody was for it. Yep.
Oh, there is no new business, right? Okay. Carry over.
Closed meeting.